Welcome back to another episode of Susie Reads. Today, we're going to continue our journey with witches, ghosts, and goblins. Do you remember that last time, Oliver was given the task of finding the perfect pearl and stealing it from the king of the giants? Well, today, we're going to journey to the land of the giants. Will they find the pearl? Will the giants just crush them when they get there? I don't know. We'll find out. Should we get started? Okay. Chapter 7, The Land of the Giants. Thousands of years ago, when the secret sea was wilder, its waves dashed against the land of the giants and carved the caves in which they live. The largest cave, and the most splendid, belongs to the king of the giants. Here he sits on his magnificent marble throne, fashioned by the force of the waves, and gazes at the sea that is strangely calm and quiet. It is a sea that is kind to the giants. Not only has it built their homes, but year after year, it also gives them gifts of food and fabulous pearls to trade for other things they need. It has been said that it is indeed fortunate for the giants, since they are too stupid and lazy to do much for themselves. However, they are huge and strong. They guard their wealth jealously. Woe to Oliver and the imp, should it be discovered that they are on their way to take away the perfect pearl, the most prized possession of the king of the goblins. Oliver and the imp wasted no time. As soon as they returned to the apartment, they announced that they would try to find the land of the giants by sailing down the underground river. All rivers find their way to larger rivers or to the sea, Oliver recited. I learned that in school. It seems quite reasonable, said Miranda, that an underground river would lead to a secret sea. I think you should give it a try. They said their goodbyes at the hidden door, which the imp had discovered only the day before. Be careful, Polly told them. Don't forget to look for cactus, Miranda instructed. In the doorway, Oliver stopped. What will you tell the guards when they find out that the imp and I are missing? Miranda put her hand to her forehead and thought very hard. I shall tell them you used magic to get away. Only that, and nothing more. Oliver and the imp waved a last goodbye and descended the stairs. The passageway became darker the farther they went. By the time they reached the storeroom, Oliver could scarcely see the imp who was leading the way. There they found lanterns, which they promptly lighted. Such a well-stocked place Oliver had never seen. They set about packing for their journey ahead. Boxes of biscuits, tins of tuna, jars of peanut butter, and cans of carrots, tomatoes, and beans were carefully stowed away into a large basket the imp had found. Here are peppermints, said the imp. Very good for seasickness, I understand. And potato chips, said Oliver, holding up a large box. Very good any time. Don't forget the magic powder for putting giants to sleep, the imp reminded Oliver. That's bound to come in handy. Oliver put a sack of the powder into each pocket of the invisible cloak he had selected for himself. He strapped a fierce-looking sword to his waist. We must be prepared for anything, he told the imp, who was trying on a pair of seven-league boots. They both selected good luck charms specially designed for warding off evil spirits. Carrying the supplies down the remaining stairs was quite a job for Oliver. The imp was too small to be of much help, but he did light the way with his lantern. However, he had suddenly become nervous and cross and kept fussing at Oliver. Hurry up, you clumsy boy! Whatever is taking you so long? You must be part turtle. At the landing where the boat waited, he turned to Oliver. When he spoke, his voice which had been sharp with anger, now trembled with fear. Um, there's something you must know, the imp quavered. Brownies are very afraid of water. Even a shower sends us scattering for toadstools to hide under. We stay indoors when there's a heavy dew. Rivers are quite out of the question. You must take this voyage alone. I'll stay here and wait for your return. Nonsense, remarked Oliver, who suspected the imp of a trick. The boat is dry and safe. He caught the imp by the arm in case he decided to scamper up the stairs. But what if we're shipwrecked? The imp pleaded. I can't swim, you know. You can hang on to me, Oliver told him. I'm a great floater. He proceeded to take a rope and tie one end of it around the imp's waist. The other he fastened securely to his sword belt. The imp grumbled that both of them were sure to drown together, but he helped Oliver load the boat. At the front of the boat, they placed a large lantern. The small lantern they tied at the back like a little tail light, and at last they shoved off, Oliver at the helm doing his best to guide the boat with the long oar, the imp clutching the side and predicting that doom was just around the bend. The river was swift. The river was strong. The river was deep. The imp squealed with what appeared to be genuine terror as they lurched first to one side of the cavern and then to the other. After a while, Oliver got the hang of handling the guiding oar, but he was very busy and had no time to comfort the imp, who moaned and groaned and kept saying, We shall be dashed to pieces on the rocks. We shall lie in a watery grave. The lantern bravely fought the darkness, but Oliver could only see a few feet ahead. Occasionally, there were stretches of twilight, as though light was seeping in from overhead. They would plunge into blackness again. Oliver was amazed at how fast the current carried them along. It was as though the boat were powered by magic motors. If this indeed was the way to the land of the giants, they could never return again against the swift running current. Clearly, they would have to find another way back. The river was now both narrow and straight, and guiding the boat was no problem. After all their work, Oliver and the imp realized they were quite hungry. There, sailing swiftly in the gloom, heaven only knows how many miles underground, they had a picnic of peanut butter and crackers, and potato chips and tuna fish, washed down by a bottled grape drink that was quite delicious. The imp perked up a bit. The boat seemed quite safe and traveled smoothly now, as though it knew where it was going. The light from the little lantern shone on the glistening cavern walls. The weirdly shaped rocks appeared to Oliver and the imp like strange creatures watching them as they sailed past. The voyage was a long one, and now and then the two sailors napped. Between naps, they snacked on and told each other stories to pass the time. It was quite impossible to know how far they had come or how long the journey was taking. Gradually, the river grew wider and more light sifted down from above. It was the imp who saw the sign. Look, he said, and pointed to a large arrow painted on the cavern wall. 15 miles to the secret sea, he read. Beware of giants. It was no time at all before they saw daylight ahead. The river's current was slow now, and it was no trouble to steer the boat close to the ledge along the side of the cavern. The imp, who had really become quite a sailor, lassoed a nearby rock with a rope and pulled the boat against the ledge where they carefully tied it so it would not drift away. Then, quietly, on foot, they walked toward the opening ahead. Bushes screened much of the entrance where the underground river met the secret sea. Oliver and the imp edged out into the open and hid behind a huge fern. Before them was a beach of sand as white as snow. The secret sea, bluer than the sky above it, lapped gently at the shore. Above them, in a sweeping half circle towards the cliffs, they were marked with huge cave openings. And pointing to the largest of these, the imp whispered, "The homes of the giants. That must be where the king lives." They were looking for some sign of life. They heard a great commotion. On the beach, there suddenly appeared a group of giant children. They called and laughed to one another, their voices thundering in the bright sunshine. Some of them played leapfrog. Others started a game of keep-away. As they raced up and down the beach, their footsteps made the earth tremble. Oliver and the imp trembled a bit too. They had never seen such huge creatures. "Perhaps," said Oliver, "we can follow them to their homes." He pulled on his invisible cloak, patting the pockets to make sure the magic sleeping powder was still there. "There's plenty of room for you under here," he whispered to the imp. Hoping their footprints would not be noticed in the sand, they walked toward the giant children. One of the younger ones was playing in the sand, her huge sand pail half filled with seashells. It was on its side near her. Oliver and the imp crept into it and hid among the shells, which were enormous too. At length, the biggest of the giant children called to the others, "Time to go back to the caves." Oliver and the imp felt themselves being hoisted into the air as the young giant child picked up her pail, swinging it dizzily as they traveled from the beach up this deeply winding path to the caves above. Finally, they were put down with a crash that rattled their teeth. A voice boomed, "Home so soon, little princess?" The princess, who was 12 feet tall, made a curtsy and answered, "Yes, your majesty." "What luck," whispered Oliver to the imp. "We must be in the cave of the king of the giants." "Now what do we do?" asked the imp. "Wait a minute," said Oliver. His eyes had just caught the gleam of something in a large oyster shell next to him. With all the strength he could manage, he pulled it open. There, glowing as though it were lighted within by a rainbow, was a pearl larger than a baseball. Oliver scooped it up and showed it to the imp. The imp gasped. He had never seen anything so beautiful. There was no time to admire it, however. "Look at my pretty shells!" screamed the giant princess, and with no more warning than that, Oliver and the imp were swinging in the air again. Oliver barely had time to pocket the pearl in his invisible cloak before he, the imp, and the shells were poured on the cave floor before the giant. What's this? Roared the giant, for Oliver's cloak had slipped off in the pile of shells. He and the imp were now clearly visible. Oliver jumped to his feet. The imp peeked out from behind him. "Pearl traders," Oliver called up to the giant. He had grabbed the invisible cloak and placed it over his arm. "Pearl traders?" repeated the giant, and the greed in his voice was frightening to hear. "We have the world's most beautiful pearl," said Oliver. "We have come to trade it to the king." The royal giant leaned down from the massive throne. "But I already have the world's most beautiful pearl," he bragged. He pointed to the gold chain around his neck. Hanging from it, shining against purple velvet of the giant's robe, was the next to the most beautiful pearl that Oliver had ever seen. It too reflected the colors of the rainbow, but more dimly. It was large, but not so large as the pearl that Oliver had found. You had the world's most beautiful pearl, said Oliver, until my assistant and I discovered this one that we have. Let me see it, the giant demanded. The imp stepped from behind Oliver. Not until we have your royal word that you will meet our demands. If, indeed, our pearl should prove to be more beautiful than yours. Speak up, the giant said. He lifted the imp and placed it on the armrest of the throne. Now, what did you say? The imp repeated his request. And what are your demands? The giant asked. Oliver moved forward. That in exchange for our pearl, you give us your pearl, which we shall present to the king of the goblins, who has long desired it. Also, that you provide us with passage back to the land of the goblins. That is all we ask. You have my royal word, the king of the giants said. Now, where is this pearl? From the pocket of the invisible cloak, Oliver produced the pearl he had found. It was indeed magnificent. The trade is made, the giant said, and he removed the chain with the pearl from around his neck. And you get a gold chain in the bargain. He gazed at the wondrous pearl, which Oliver now handed him. A ship, fully equipped, will take you along the coast to the nearest seaport, to the land of the goblins. From there, you must travel by overland by coach, which will be provided. It will not be a long journey. Oliver and the imp, who had been returned to the floor, bowed low. But father, wailed the giant princess, you did not even look at my pretty shells. Take them to your room. They are only playthings. He fondled the gem in his hands and smiled at the pearl traders. Thank you, he said. This has been my lucky day. Ours too, returned Oliver and the imp, as they turned to walk back to the beach and await the ship. Their mission had been accomplished far more easily than they had dreamed. And that is the end of chapter 7. And next week, we will read about their trip back. What do you think's going to happen? Anything exciting? I don't know. We'll find out. See you next time on Susie Reads.